Division of humanity? I mean, the P-52 Orion,
I don't consider
Nordics.
any division of humanity good. I consider them the more positive of the two because I consider the positive aspects of humanity to be the spiritual aspects.
So you're saying the Nordic line is spiritual?
Yeah,
more
extremely,
spiritual.
Extremely, yeah.
Okay. So how does the Nordic line, I mean, you say they stay out.
They actually move off from Earth first. The J-rods, or the precursors to the J-rods, stay on Earth for a great deal of time. Well after 24,000 years from the time of the transition, like 24,000 years from now, because there were 24 or so thousand years ahead of us when they crashed in Roswell in 1947. Those were 24s. They stay. The Orions move off first to the place after the reestablishment of a society on the surface of the Earth. Technology is refurbished, etc. They move off to the place where the Ark is held.
Which is where?
Our nearest body, the Moon.
The Moon.
Where on it, I'm not going to say.
Okay. Well, this
Because
gets
I'm having
into...
to defend against the possibility of Timeline 1 transitioning over to Timeline 2 in a manner different than I've been told. And I'm not going to be the person who hands off the wrong information.
So, okay, but you're saying the Nordics are going to get off Earth if the catastrophe happens, or regardless,
They leave after.
after the catastrophe happens.
Presumably several thousand years after it happens. They
Several
leave.
thousand
They-
years.
yes,
I
they
was
move
getting
to
the
moon.
impression you were talking about
not
them
really.
going on spaceships or something.
No. They move off to the Moon several thousand years via spacecraft. They get to the place where the Ark was held, and they reestablish a new community. From there, they move to Mars. From Mars out to Orion.
So
Talking a lot of time here.
the face on Mars, is this, are we looking at something that was left behind by the Nordics?
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking
as best
forward.
as I know.
We're looking forward to our future when we're looking at the ruins.
Yeah, we're looking at a paradox of their ruins, which they left on another planet.
In our future.
In our future.
In our possible future.
Yep.
Okay, well, to come back to this
She's
future...
actually got the best command of this information of anyone in the public with whom I've spoken.
I know. Thank you. That's a very sweet thing to say.
It's honest.
Thank you. We've got I'm getting another question here from our small audience, and I must say that Bill Ryan is...
Bill Ryan?
Bill Ryan is also sitting with me and listening to this amazing information and asking some good questions.
When we're looking at Mars, are we therefore
Mars.
looking at the future?
Now the question
I just
is this.
don't understand that.
The question of the day is that what is going to happen? What is going to happen when the transition occurs and we either continue on one or, God forbid, number two happens? If number two happens, we're not going to be worried about Mars. We will have much more important things to worry about at that moment. Let's say, God willing, and I think we will, remain on timeline 1. What's going to happen with our imagery of Mars? I think we'll probably remember taking images of these anomalous structures. And there have been some anomalous structures imaged on the Moon as well. So I think we're probably going to remember that. At least I think so. If we don't, it's not going to matter now, is it?
So what you're saying is we're going to go back to the idea that there is no face on Mars.
Or there will be a face on Mars, and it will be presented to us at that moment as something different. Maybe the bricks will turn to rocks, and we will get there and find out that all of these beautiful ruins, including the scorpion. If you don't think it's a scorpion, tell me what it is. Okay, I'll show you the images from Star City. on the top of this pyramid. If it's not a scorpion, tell me what it is. But perhaps we're going to get there and we're going to find out that all of this presumed architecture that we are seeing by virtue of the geometry that we're attempting to apply to these images is nothing more than rocks. That we've never been there. Because at that moment, because we had not transited over to timeline 2, that we have never visited there until we finally put, quote unquote, man on Mars.
But there's a profound paradox here, because
there is.
Because what I hear you saying is that we're looking through telescopes where we're receiving light in present time with a few minutes difference. That's being reflected off objects on the surface of Mars, but we're actually looking at a possible future.
That's right.
I don't understand.
There are impacts into our timeline now which have occurred. This is the information that I received not only from Kaela, but also from the material within Majestic. There are impacts into our reality now, our timeline now, by virtue of the amount of time travel which has occurred. Every time they have gone back in time, they have caused small paradoxes which have built up as our reality that we now perceive. In other words, there is actual Newtonian superimposing. And that is a frightening thing to me.
So it's almost like putting money in the bank, though, every time they come from the P45s, in a sense. Their timeline becomes
as creating a larger heap of manure.
Well, okay, but emphasis appreciated. However, nonetheless, it is like a deposit towards the actual occurrence happening.
I don't know.
They are agents of change, in a sense.
They are agents of change, as all human beings are agents of change. But I don't know whether there is a cause-effect, whether there's a nexus between cause and effect having to do with their amount of time travel and the superimposition which is going on in our reality and the disaster itself. I think that the disaster itself, from everything that I've read and heard, is a direct consequence of the technological aspect of bringing too much energy toward us in a non-natural manner.
Okay, well, basically, you're saying there's two timelines. I'm sure you're aware of the work of physicists now that are saying, look, if you can have two timelines, you can have 2 million.
Well, don't we really have 3 or 4? I'm discussing 24,000s. I'm discussing 45,000s, 52,000s, and present day. How many timelines are that? Because these people moved ahead linearly in their timeline. Just because we want to call it timeline 2 doesn't mean that there are other effects or superimposings which are occurring on different realities during even their own timelines.
Exactly. There's a sense at which what you're talking about is not so much that the P45s, for example, timeline won't exist, as it will actually separate from our reality and become more like a parallel reality instead of an intersecting one.
From what I understand, the people who were just prior, which would be us, according to their history, to the people who were just after, exist as a straight vector of time. So in other words, God forbid the catastrophe occur, it will just appear as tomorrow the catastrophe occurs, etc., and we move forward and changes start occurring in the earth. There is a disaster, there is a loss of huge life, etc. We won't probably feel anything change aside from the fact